This is the long-tailed, fine, I just wanted you to be in the video. This is the long-tailed Jaeger. It's a type of seabird in the skua family. These guys mainly live and breed in and around the Arctic, so in areas of North America like Alaska and Canada, as well as over in Eurasia, countries such as Russia, or in Scandinavia like Norway, Sweden, Finland, all of that. These guys are overall the smallest type of Jaeger, excluding their tail feathers, which make them one of the longest, but they're overall quite a lot smaller and daintier than other types of Jaegers. Now, these guys tend to be somewhat of food parasites. They will steal food from other seabirds such as gulls and other skuas. However, they are migratory, and it has been cited, interestingly enough, that while migrating, they're more likely to catch their own food instead of stealing, which I find interesting because you would think it takes less energy to steal because you need a lot of energy for migration, but apparently not so. This is the ruff. It is a type of sandpiper, and at least this is what the female looks like, and what the male looks like, except when it doesn't. Females look like this year-round, and often the males look quite similar, if larger. However, when breeding season comes, it can get a little bit funky, because in breeding season, they do a molt and turn into these fabulous motherfuckers, which is where they get the name ruff from that big old fringe of feathers right around the head. Now this, as you may guess, is used in mating, for mating displays and for sexual selection. The fancier and more extravagant the ruff, the better the male is. However, not all males look like this. This would be what is called a territorial male. Territorial males are the typical ones you think of for sexual selection. They are flamboyant, they are loud, they are big. They will fight each other to get to a female to show that they are the biggest and the best. These territorial males will do anything they can to get the female's attention. They will fight off each other. They will be loud. They will show off their extravagant mating dance. However, they're not always successful because there are other males. Here we see two different ruff males, our regular territorial male and this guy with the right ruff, which is called a satellite male. These satellite males, which you may guess due to the name, they kind of just float around the edge. They hang out on the side. They don't do the elaborate mating displays. They don't fight each other. They just kind of hang out and wait for an opportunity. When they observe that there's a female that is looking ready to mate, she's like, ooh, that guy over there, I'm liking it. He will kind of do a little swoop in. May I have this dance? You look all nice and ready. Let's go for me instead of that macho douchebag over there. They're not as aggressive, they're not as flamboyant, they don't do the whole fight and dance, they just kind of wait and swoop in at the right moment and cock block the other dude. And then we also have the third type of male, the female mimic males. Now, these guys operate very similarly to satellite males, however, they are much less obvious about it. They don't grow any mating plumage, they don't have that fancy ruff or anything, and they look, for all intents and purposes, like a female ruff. Location change because my family members entered the living room. It's kind of windy. But female mimic males, they look like the females, and they do something that is called sneak mating. So this is kind of similar but distinct to what these satellite males do. These satellite males kind of wait on the fringes, and they just kind of swoop in and be like, hey, you should go with me instead of the regular territorial male. Sneak mating, what the female mimic males do, is just what it sounds like, sneak mating. The female doesn't really know that this is happening. So the females will be ready. They will have chosen a male, whether it's a territorial or a satellite male. They'll have chosen a male and got into position and waited for the male to come to them. But the sneak male, in that time, in between the female getting into position and the other male coming in, will scoot in and go really fast with the female without her really knowing. that it was a sneak male instead of the chosen male. So this is just another strategy adopted by those males that don't really have the advantage of the fancy ruffs and the mating dances and all that, but it is a way for them to be able to pass their genes on. All around, just a very interesting strategy employed by these weird-looking birds. 3 interesting strategies, actually. This is the Micronesian Myzomela. It's a type of bird found through pretty much all of the islands of Micronesia. It is a nectar-eating bird, which means it basically just drinks all of the nectar out of flowers, and that is what it survives on. It occasionally will eat insects and other invertebrates, but most of the time it eats nectar. This makes it a very important source of pollination for most of the flowers that it eats its nectar out of. These guys used to live on Guam, not these exact ones, but a similar species, but they did go extinct on Guam, and since it was one of the main pollinators, it caused a lot of problems in the Guam ecosystem. They tend to be mostly solitary, hanging out alone or sometimes in pairs, because they tend to be very territorial and can become aggressive towards each other of their own species, or even other birds in other species. They also tend to be quite adaptable and make use of both the natural and man-made structures to live in and build their nests. This is the Mot-mot bird, a type of bird native to Central America. Now, the most noticeable feature of this bird is its interesting looking tail feathers. Now, the bird's feathers don't originally look like this. When the bird first gets its mature flight feathers, or after a new molt, when the new feathers grow in, they're all uniform the entire way down the length of the feather. There's not that little, it's called a racket shape at the end. It's just uniform all the way down. Now, most species of Mot-mot do have this racket shape on their tail. There are a few, such as the toady Mot-mot, where their feathers are uniform all the way down, but in a lot of species they do look like this. Now, it used to be thought that these birds would intentionally pluck out the feathers in order to make that racket shape. They would pluck them out with their beak in the middle of the feather and just leave the top part in the end. However, that has been proven since to be false. In actuality, the middle parts of those feathers are extremely brittle and prone to fall off, so they do just naturally kind of fall off the stalk of the feather during just movement. They will brush against something, or when the bird preens, which is the bird cleaning, they will just kind of naturally come off, leaving the end and the top to be feathered while the middle is bare. Now, there are potentially a couple different reasons for this to happen, one of them being sexual selection. The females of the species think that that is really cool, but the other reason has actually been an observed behavior called the wag display. What the wag display is, when the bird spots a potential predator, it will wiggle its tail back and forth, causing the bottom racket shape to move in kind of a pendulum motion. This lets the predator know that the Mot-mot is aware of its presence. The Mot-mot knows that the predator is there, and now the predator knows that the bird knows. So the predator is aware that the bird is just going to fly away. This kind of acts as a warning from the bird to the predator, basically being like, hey, I know you're here and I'm just going to dip, so might as well save both of us the trouble and not bother trying to chase me, because this will result in unnecessary energy spent from both the bird and the predator. It costs energy for the bird to fly away from the predator, and it costs energy for the predator to try to chase and hunt the bird. And if unsuccessful, which it most likely will be, because the bird will have enough time to get away, it will just cost unnecessary energy that neither of the animals would otherwise need to spend. So the wag display motion is basically just the bird being like, dude, don't even bother. We're gonna tire ourselves out for no reason. And so we just have this very interesting looking bird with a very interesting looking tail for 2 very important reasons, most likely. This cool little bird is the Jacana. Now, there are multiple species of Jacana throughout the world, but the most famous one is this guy, the African Jacana. They live in the tropical areas, can be found in multiple places, mainly Africa and South America, but a couple other places as well. They are wading water birds and spend most of their time in and around the water, and they get another name, the Jesus bird, by actually walking on the vegetation floating on top of the water. How is it possible that this miracle can occur? Well, let me show you. These are the feet of the Jacana birds. They have a very wide foot with very long, thick toes with a lot of surface area, which makes it very easy to stand on top of the floating vegetation in the water. This works by a similar method of which snowshoes work. Large surface area helps distribute the weight so they can stay on top of the water and floating vegetation. And before you ask, yes, their babies do have the same disproportionately large feet and toes. This is quite a oddly proportioned creature here, and they too can walk on the water, and sometimes for a defense they will just sink underneath and just have their beak poking up so they can breathe to avoid predators. Largely, they do join their parents walking on top of the vegetation. However, sometimes they get tired, and when they do that, they need a rest, so they get carried by their parents. How sweet. Yes, this is a mother African Jacana carrying her babies underneath her wings in her foliage with just their little eldritch horror feet sticking out. So, yeah, she just carries them around, but their feet are too large to fit under the feathers with the rest of their bodies, so they just kind of dangle. I think we as a society should be talking more about odd domestic pigeon breeds. Obviously, we've got our classic, the homing pigeon, the timeless, beautiful, like, we know her, we love her, she is gorgeous. But there are more. Then we've got a few more interesting color variations, such as the parlor roller, the gorgeous black and white. Again, we love her. But then we start to get into some of the stranger pigeons, such as the owl pigeons, with that face structure is edging into pug territory. But of course, we can always go the opposite direction, as with the dragoon pigeon, which is edging into parrot territory. Then getting a little bit fancier, we can get the fantail pigeons, which, like, a little bit excessive, but go off. It's kind of a sleigh. But then it goes a little bit too far with the powder pigeons. Like, that's just a little bit too much. We're doing too much. And also, like, look at the feet. Like, we don't need to be doing all that. And speaking of excessive feet, we have the trumpeter pigeon. Again, doing too much. We don't need the boots with the fur. And also, I think that it is very important for everybody to see the trumpeter pigeon from the top down. I think everyone just needs to take a second to look at a trumpeter pigeon from the top down. And then we have this guy, the cropper pigeons, in specific the holly cropper pigeons. Now, some croppers are not as bad as this one, but the holly croppers in specific, what are we doing here? You cannot tell me that this is a happy, healthy, structurally sound bird. Like, you can't tell me that this can move and fly and, like, just pigeon properly. What is this here? I don't like that. And finally, in the opposite direction of that, we have the Romanian naked neck pigeon. Yeah. This cute little guy is the vampire finch. They're endemic to a couple islands in the Galapagos, and mainly they eat things like nuts and berries and bugs and nectar, and also blood. During the dry seasons especially, these little guys will peck at larger birds, mainly blue-footed boobies, and just peck at them until they start to bleed, at which point they will drink the blood. And the boobies tend to just, like, not really care. This is hypothesized to be because it's very similar to parasite picking activities that other finches do, so they just don't, like, notice. This is an adaptation on the finches' part due to a lack of fresh and drinkable water on many of the islands that they're endemic to, so they just drink blood instead. And occasionally they're also known for eating eggs of other birds, which they roll out of the nest onto the hard ground where they crack open and get eaten. Stream Heinz Hall, all proceeds go to Palestine. The Himalayan monal is a type of pheasant that can be found in areas of the Himalayas, including in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, and India. It generally prefers relatively high altitudes, living in the ranges of the Himalayan mountains. It largely eats plant matters, things like roots and shoots and tubers, as well as small invertebrates like snails and insects. It's not considered to be endangered, but in some areas it is at risk for poaching because of its feathers, mainly its crest, which is used in lots of like clothing and fancy hats and all that. And it is a very fascinating looking bird with all of the iridescence and the different colors. Stream Hinds Hall, all proceeds go to Palestine. This is the New Caledonia crow, one of the most fascinating birds ever. It's native to New Caledonia, which is an island off of Australia, and it's probably the most intelligent non-primate animal ever. Intelligence is subjective, but objectively intelligent. The thing that it is the most famous for is its tool use. Now, these guys aren't the only things that are known to make tools, but they're some of the best non-primates at it ever. Most of their tool use is in order to obtain food, largely insects and grubs from out of wood. They will take sticks and fashion them into the right size and length, and then stick them into little holes and fish out grubs and other insects to eat. Now, when obtaining these tools, they prefer to use sticks and stuff that already have naturally occurring barbs and hooks and pointy things to be able to fish the insects out. However, if they can't find one to their liking, they will make one to their liking. And they are very, very good at making their own hooked tools in order to better get these insects. So first they find a stick and they will pick that stick off of the tree or bush or whatever, and if it's already the right length and has a hook, great. If not, they will trim it to the correct length and potentially fashion a hook using that stick, or they will trim leaves of specific plants into the specific shape, usually rectangular, that they like, and add it to the stick in order to make the ideal insect grabbing tool. They're also some of the only non-primate animals to actually make new tools using existing tools. They will manufacture entirely new tools. And they will also share this tool-making knowledge with other New Caledonia crows. They use stencils and templates and stuff in order to show each other how to make the best and most effective tool. They will share their knowledge. And there's multiple different tool types that are seen, but instead of them being created independently in all these different areas, it's likely that these birds just shared the tool-making knowledge among the entire population, and it just spread out geographically. Studies have also shown that these birds have been observed to make tools out of things they would not normally encounter in the wild, under ideal conditions, pollution and littering notwithstanding. But in a controlled experimental setting, there were a few crows that were given wires that normally they would not see in the wild, like copper wires, and given food in a thing, and they used the copper wires to make tools and hooks in a similar fashion, which they would twigs. And they have not encountered this material before, so they found this material, found that they could use it, and then did use it in a tool-making setting. They've also, in other experimental settings, been observed to use a tool in order to get another tool, which usually requires pretty high cognitive function, which again is subjective. But in this experiment, crows were given a short stick and a box. Now, the short stick was too short to eat the food in the box, but the short stick could get at a longer stick, which could get the food in the box. And the crows did do that. They used the short stick to get the long stick to get the food, which requires a lot of mental effort. So all in all, these crows are very, very intelligent. In objective terms, they're probably one of, if not the most intelligent birds, and they are corvids, which overall are a very intelligent group of animals, but these guys specifically have evolved some really, really neat, like tool making and cognitive capabilities and are now being used in many research settings as tests for the evolution and progression of intelligence, even though intelligence is subjective. The pheasant coucal is a type of bird that's native to areas in Australia as well as some places in New Guinea and East Timor. It's mainly carnivorous, eating other small birds as well as reptiles and insects. It is in the cuckoo family, but instead of being a brood parasite like most other cuckoos, it does actually build its own pretty impressive nest structure. In addition to building their own nests, the males of the species are almost always the ones that actually incubate the eggs. They sit on them and take care of them while the female brings them food and does the rest of the stuff. They are largely ground birds, spending most of their time running or hopping around. They can fly, they're just not very good at it. They tend to be clumsy and kind of crash around in the underbrush when they try to fly, so they tend to avoid it. They can fly, but they're not very good at it. All in all, they are a very cool and interesting bird, and they do look like something out of a fantasy movie. This is the European wryneck, a type of little bird in the woodpecker family that is largely found in Asia and Europe. However, it is migratory, so in certain parts of the year it can be found in areas of Africa as well. And it is the most well known for its defense mechanism. So when one of the European wrynecks is disturbed or agitated, it will start doing this, which is a defense mechanism used to mimic a snake. So when there is a predator present or just a human that is trying to bandit for research, which is what's happening in this video, the European wryneck will start to flop its head around all crazy. It can tilt its head like 180 degrees almost, and it will do its absolute best to look like a snake. And if you're unaware of this, this is kind of freaky. So most predators will see this and be like, oh, that's either a very unhealthy and sick bird, or that's a snake that is kind of scary. Either way, I'm going to leave that alone. Additionally, some birds will just pause in the kind of flopped back position and try to mimic being dead, such as what a possum does, so it will play possum. And if you are unfamiliar with this bird and don't know really what's going on, this is kind of freaky, so much so that early people, when seeing this, they thought that it was under a curse or a jinx by a witch, which is where the scientific name of this bird, Jinx torquilla, comes from, because people thought that they were cursed or jinxed. And evidently it's a pretty effective defense mechanism, and it also just looks a little bit silly. Let's talk about the Kia parrot, as referenced in this comment. The Kia is a type of parrot native to New Zealand, and it is considered to be the only type of alpine parrot in the world, meaning it lives in quite colder and higher elevation than other parrots typically like to live in. But that is not, by far, the only interesting thing about them. One of the things that they are the most famous for is, as the comment above referenced, a very, very big personality and also being very, very intelligent. So, corvids and parrots are typically considered to be the most intelligent types of birds in the world, specifically African grey and Kia parrots, as well as crows, specifically New Caledonia crows are often referenced as being very, very intelligent. They are very well known for their tool use. They use like sticks and rocks as hammers and just many, many other things. They are very, very good at making tools. There's one specific instance recorded of a parrot that unfortunately had a broken upper beak and was seen using a rock in places where a beak would normally be the thing to use, but unfortunately since its beak was broken, it could not use its beak, so it learned how to use a rock instead and was actually very successful. Now, part of their intelligence is that they're also very, very playful. There's been recordings of one specific sound that these Kia parrots make to other Kia parrots that's basically like, "What's up, it's party time." So when one of these birds makes this sound, or when a researcher that is around makes this sound, all the rest of the Kia parrots in the area are like, "Fuck yeah, it's party time." And they just use it they play. They have a very good time. They are very playful parrots. And their playful personality combined with their intelligence, also makes it so they are a little bit chaotic and mischievous. There's been records of people in New Zealand having pranks pulled on them by these Kia parrots. They steal things from tourists and locals, they get into garbage, they break into things, they use tools, and their intelligence to basically cause problems on purpose, which I vibe with. Now, while Kia parrots aren't typically observed to talk in the same way that African grey and other parrot species do, they are observed to have something similar to their own language. Like I said with the prior vocalization of "it's fucking party time," they also have a bunch of other vocalizations that can be broadly classed into a very, very simple language in some ways that have been observed in dolphins and elephants. Now, take this information with a grain of salt because I've only been able to find one source about this, but the source I found did say that genetic analysis of the Kia and humans have reported a very similar language gene called plexin. So the sequence in the plexin gene in both Kias and humans are very similar. They have pretty much the same, like with obviously some differences, sequence in this gene that is hypothesized to be very important in language development. Now again, I could only find one source about this, so I'm not sure how true that is, but if it is true, that would be very cool. Now, some other interesting things about the Kia is that they are omnivorous, meaning they will eat pretty much anything they can. Now, while this tends to be things like fruits and nuts and insects, they will also eat meat. A lot of it. They will, if possible, hunt things like smaller birds and rodents, also feed off of carcasses to get at the meat and the bone marrow. But there's also been verified reports of them eating live sheep. Yeah. So what they do, what they've been seen doing, is they will land on the sheep, they will use their beak to part through all of the thick wool and eat the fat and flesh off of a sheep's back, sides, etc. While the sheep is just like there. It's just like a regular live sheep. It's not like a sheep carcass or anything. Now, while this itself does not kill the sheep, however, if it happens often enough and there's enough blood loss and tissue loss, this can cause problems as well as allowing for infections to potentially set in. So as you can imagine, this bird was not very popular with sheep farmers, so they would often get killed to both protect the sheep and sell their feathers. However, since they are now classified as endangered, it is illegal to kill them in New Zealand because they are protected, so you can get heavy fines if you're found having to harm one of these, which is good for the parrots. Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting that curveball in what was previously a wholesome video about very smart parrots. So, unfortunately, they are still considered to be endangered, but since they're heavily protected, the population is rebounding, which is good. But yeah, they are probably my favorite parrot species because of their intelligence, their personality, and then just that fun little tidbit of them being a little bit unhinged.